Ben Wallace adjusted his red MAGA hat as he entered through the east entrance, his weathered hands smoothing down his casual navy blazer. At 72, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had built his fortune from nothing but determination and grit. The hat had been a gift from his grandson, Tommy, and while Ben didn't consider himself particularly political, wearing it made him feel connected to the boy who was away at college. The familiar scent of cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee wafted from the food court, mixing with the subtle vanilla fragrance that the mall pumped through its ventilation system. Ben's footsteps echoed against the marble flooring as he made his way past Bath and Body Works, where Laura Williams stood arranging a display of autumn-scented candles. Laura, a regular shopper known for her strong opinions and even stronger voice, froze mid-arrangement. Her carefully manicured nails dug into the pumpkin pecan waffles candle she was holding. The sight of the red hat sent a jolt of anger through her system, her shoulders tensing beneath her cream cashmere sweater. "Not in my mall," she muttered, setting down the candle with enough force to make the entire display rattle. Several other shoppers turned to look, but Laura was already on her phone, her French-tipped nails tapping furiously against the screen as she pulled up the mall security number. Mike Carson was enjoying his coffee break in the security office when the call came in. The young officer, only 3 years into his career, sighed as he recognized Laura's number flashing on the screen. At 28, with close-cropped dark hair and a frame built from regular gym sessions, Mike prided himself on handling difficult situations with calm professionalism. But Laura had a way of testing everyone's patience. "Mall security, this is Officer Carson," he answered, already reaching for his tablet to log the inevitable complaint. "Mike, thank goodness." Laura's voice crackled through the speaker. "There's a man wearing one of those horrible MAGA hats walking around like he owns the place. He's making people uncomfortable. You need to do something about this immediately." Mike pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache forming. "Ma'am, wearing political merchandise isn't against mall policy as long as it's not causing a disturbance." "Well, I'm disturbed." Laura's voice rose an octave. "And I'm not the only one. Sir needs to hear about this. Where is she?" Mike glanced at the security feed, spotting Sarah Green, the mall manager, doing her usual Saturday rounds near Nordstrom. Sarah, with her perfectly pressed pantsuit and perpetually harried expression, had been running Crystal Haven Mall for the past 5 years. She ruled her retail kingdom with an iron fist wrapped in designer silk. "Ms. Williams, I'll look into the situation," Mike said, trying to keep his voice level. "But please remember that we can't discriminate against customers based on political views." "Discriminate? This isn't about discrimination." Laura's voice had reached that particular pitch that made dogs nervous. "This is about creating a safe shopping environment. I spend thousands of dollars here every month, and I shouldn't have to feel threatened while picking out scented candles." Mike ended the call as politely as he could and radioed his partner, Jenny Lopez. Jenny was already on the main floor, her dark ponytail swinging as she made her rounds. "Hey, Jenny, heads up. We've got a situation brewing near Bath and Body Works. Laura Williams is worked up about a customer wearing political merchandise." Jenny's sigh crackled through the radio. "Again? What is it this time?" "MAGA hatanan edali gentlemen. Keep an eye on the situation, but don't engage unless necessary. I'm heading down now." Ben, meanwhile, was completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. He had stopped at the directory, studying the recent changes to the store layout. As the new owner, he wanted to understand how customers experience the space. The mall had been a significant investment, and he planned to make it a model of modern retail excellence. He noticed a young family struggling with a stroller near the escalator. Without hesitation, Ben stepped forward to help, his strong hands carefully lifting the front wheels while the grateful parents managed the back. The mother's smile faltered slightly when she noticed his hat, but the genuine kindness in Ben's blue eyes seemed to put her at ease. "Thank you, sir," the father said, adjusting his sleeping toddler in the stroller. "These escalators can be tricky." Ben smiled warmly. "No trouble at all. My daughter used to have the same problem when my grandkids were little. Have a wonderful day." The interaction didn't go unnoticed by Laura, who had positioned herself near the pretzel stand for a better view. She watched as Ben continued his walk through the mall, stopping occasionally to window shop or check his phone. His presence seemed to ripple through the crowd, drawing mixed reactions. Some people pointedly looked away, while others nodded in greeting. Mike arrived on the scene just as Laura was working herself into another frenzy. She had gathered a small group of sympathetic shoppers, their voices rising in shared indignation. The security officer recognized the potential for escalation and radioed for Jenny to join him. "Ladies, is there a problem here?" Mike asked, positioning himself between the group and Ben's general direction. Laura launched into her grievances, her voice carrying across the atrium. "That man is deliberately trying to provoke people. This is supposed to be a family-friendly environment." Ben turned at the commotion, his expression remaining calm even as he realized he was the subject of their discussion. He had faced far worse in his years of building his business empire. Still, it saddened him to see such division over something as simple as a hat. Jenny arrived, her presence adding an air of additional authority to the situation. She was younger than Mike, but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had handled her fair share of mall disputes. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. You're causing more of a disturbance than the gentleman you're complaining about." The situation might have diffused there if Sarah Green hadn't chosen that moment to investigate the growing crowd. The mall manager's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she approached, her expression shifting from professional concern to barely concealed disgust as she spotted Ben's hat. Sarah had built her career on maintaining Crystal Haven Mall's upscale image. In her mind, political statements of any kind threatened the carefully cultivated atmosphere she had created. She didn't see a grandfatherly figure helping with strollers. She saw a potential threat to her quarterly numbers. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of managing retail crises. Laura jumped at the opportunity. "Sarah, thank goodness. This man is wearing political propaganda that's making customers uncomfortable. Several people have complained." Ben turned to face the group fully now, his posture straight but non-threatening. "I wasn't aware that my choice of headwear violated any mall policies," he said calmly, his voice carrying the hint of a smile. "I'm simply here to observe and shop, like anyone else." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. "Sir, while we respect everyone's right to their political views, we have to consider the comfort of all our customers. I'm going to have to ask you to either remove the hat or leave the premises." A subtle shift occurred in Ben's demeanor. Not anger, but something more like disappointment mixed with amusement. "Are you certain that's the position you want to take, Ms. Green?" "Absolutely," Sarah replied, her voice clipped. "Officer Carson, please escort this gent. Leave him out if he refuses to comply." Mike and Jenny exchanged uncomfortable glances. Something about the situation felt wrong, but they had their orders. As they moved to flank Ben, he raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "There's no need for that," he said quietly. "I'll leave voluntarily, but I suggest you all take some time to reflect on how you've handled this situation." He reached into his blazer and pulled out a business card, holding it out to Sarah. "You might find this interesting reading." Sarah took the card automatically, her face draining of color as she read the name embossed in gold letters. Benjamin Wallace, CEO, Wallace Retail Properties. Below it, in smaller text, owner, Crystal Haven Mall. The card trembled slightly in Sarah's hand as the full impact of her mistake began to sink in. Ben was already walking toward the exit, his posture relaxed but dignified. The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, whispers and shocked murmurs following in his wake. Laura, for once, was speechless, her face flushed with embarrassment as she realized the magnitude of what she had set in motion. The scented candles suddenly seemed very far away from her mind. Mike and Jenny stood frozen, their training offering no guidance for this particular situation. Sarah's perfectly manicured fingers crumpled the business card's edges as she watched her career potentially crumble before her eyes. The afternoon sun continued to stream through the skylight, illuminating the scene with an almost theatrical quality. In its warm glow, the mall's polished surfaces seemed to mock the human drama that had just unfolded, a silent witness to the consequences of hasty judgments and unexamined biases. As Ben pushed through the east entrance doors, the same ones he had entered through just an hour earlier, He pulled out his phone and pressed a single number on his speed dial. "Janet? Get me David Sterling's number. We need to have a conversation about Crystal Haven Mall's management structure." The automatic doors hissed shut behind him, leaving a wake of uncertainty and regret in the climate-controlled atmosphere of Crystal Haven Mall. The weekend crowd continued their shopping, but the air had changed, charged with the electricity of impending change and the weight of lessons yet to be learned. Ben Wallace sat in his Tesla Model S, his hands resting on the leather steering wheel as he gathered his thoughts. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, and through his windshield, he could see the gleaming facade of Crystal Haven Mall, his mall. The situation that had just unfolded would require careful handling, not just for the sake of his investment, but for the broader message it could send about leadership and inclusivity in today's divided world. Janet, his assistant of 15 years, had already texted him David Sterling's contact information. David had been the regional director for the mall's previous management company, and Ben had decided to retain him during the acquisition, impressed by his track record of handling difficult situations with grace and wisdom. As Ben dialed the number, he watched a group of teenagers exit the mall, their laughter carrying across the parking lot, reminding him why he'd invested in retail spaces in the first place. They were more than just buildings. They were community gathering places. Inside the mall, the aftermath of the confrontation rippled through the corridors like an invisible wave. Sarah Green had retreated to her office, her normally confident stride reduced to a shuffle as she clutched Ben's business card like a harbinger of doom. The tastefully decorated space that had been her sanctuary for 5 years suddenly felt foreign, as if the modern art prints and ergonomic furniture were mocking her predicament. Laura Williams had abandoned her shopping spree, leaving a cart full of autumn-scented candles untouched near the register. The drive home in her Range Rover was spent in uncharacteristic silence, her mind replaying the scene over and over, each iteration making her sink lower in her leather seat. Her social media accounts, usually buzzing with updates about her shopping finds and political commentary, remained surprisingly quiet that afternoon. Mike Carson and Jenny Lopez retreated to the security office, the weight of their involvement hanging heavy in the air-conditioned space. The bank of monitors showing various angles of the mall seemed to taunt them with images of normal Saturday shopping activity, as if the ground-shifting event they'd just participated in had never happened. "I've never seen anything like this," Jenny said, breaking the tense silence. She was reviewing the security footage, watching the interaction play out from multiple angles. "We should have handled it differently." Mike nodded, his coffee now cold and forgotten on the desk. "The protocol doesn't cover everything. Sometimes you have to trust your gut, and mine was screaming that we were making a mistake." Their radios crackled with routine calls. A lost child near the food court, a suspicious package that turned out to be a forgotten gym bag. But both officers found it hard to focus on these mundane tasks. The incident with Ben Wallace had shaken their professional confidence, forcing them to question the line between following orders and making ethical judgments. Meanwhile, David Sterling was already in motion. The call from Ben had been brief, but clear. Immediate action was needed to address the situation. His silver Audi cut through traffic as he made his way to the mall, his hands-free system already connecting calls to arrange an emergency meeting with key personnel. The mall's operations continued their normal rhythm. The fountain splashed, the escalators hummed, and the overhead music played its endless loop of inoffensive pop songs. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, there was a current of tension, an awareness that something significant had shifted in the carefully maintained ecosystem of Crystal Haven Mall. Sarah's office phone rang, making her jump. David Sterling's name flashed on the caller ID, and her hand trembled as she reached for the receiver. The conversation was brief and to the point. An emergency meeting in 30 minutes, all relevant personnel to attend. The conference room on the mall's administrative level had always felt oversized for their usual meetings, but today it seemed suffocating despite its generous proportions. Sarah sat rigid in her chair, her blazer feeling too tight across her shoulders. Mike and Jenny occupied chairs near the door, their security uniforms suddenly feeling like costumes rather than symbols of authority. David Sterling entered the room exactly on time, his presence filling the space with a gravity that made everyone sit up straighter. He placed his briefcase on the polished conference table and took a moment to survey the assembled staff, his expression unreadable. "I assume you all understand why we're here," he began, his voice carrying the weight of years of management experience. "Mr. Wallace has shared with me the details of today's incident, but I'd like to hear your perspective on what happened." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah cleared her throat, attempting to maintain some semblance of professional composure. "I was responding to customer complaints about a political display that was making others uncomfortable. I had no idea." "That's precisely the problem, isn't it?" David interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "We made assumptions. We acted on those assumptions without proper consideration of our policies, our values, or the rights of our customers." The afternoon sun slanted through the conference room's windows, creating long shadows that seemed to point accusingly at each person present. Outside, the weekend crowd continued their shopping, unaware of the drama unfolding in the administrative lev. L above them. "Mr. Wallace has owned this mall for 3 weeks," David continued, pacing slowly around the table. "He's been visiting regularly, observing operations, understanding the dynamics of the space he's invested in. Today was the first time he experienced our customer service firsthand, and I think we can all agree it wasn't our finest moment." Jenny shifted in her seat, the memory of her hesitation playing through her mind. "Sir, as security officers, we're trained to handle difficult situations, but this was different. We should have questioned the basis of the complaint more thoroughly." David nodded, acknowledging her insight. "Exactly. We've become so focused on avoiding conflict that we've forgotten the difference between genuine security concerns and personal biases. That ends today." He opened his briefcase and withdrew several folders, placing them on the table with deliberate care. "Mr. Wallace has authorized immediate changes to our operational policies. But more importantly, he wants to use this incident as a catalyst for meaningful change in how we approach diversity and inclusion in our retail spaces." Sarah's perfectly maintained facade finally cracked. "Am I being terminated?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Wallace believes in learning from mistakes, but he also believes in accountability. You'll have until the end of the month to transition your responsibilities. We'll provide a generous severance package, but yes, we'll be seeking new leadership for Crystal Haven Mall." The news landed like a physical weight in the room. Mike and Jenny exchanged glances, their own futures uncertain. David seemed to read their concerns. "As for our security team, you'll be required to undergo additional training in conflict resolution and bias recognition. Mr. Wallace was impressed by your initial hesitation. It showed good instinct, even if you ultimately followed a flawed order. He's willing to give you the opportunity to grow from this experience." The meeting continued as David outlined the immediate changes that would be implemented. New signage would be designed and installed, emphasizing the mall's commitment to being a welcoming space for all. Staff would undergo comprehensive training in diversity and inclusion. A customer feedback system would be revamped to ensure complaints were evaluated objectively. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow through the conference room windows, the future of Crystal Haven Mall was being reshaped. The day's events had exposed uncomfortable truths about prejudice and presumption, but they had also opened the door for positive change. In his car, Ben Wallace reviewed the email from David detailing the outcomes of the meeting. His grandson Tommy's MAGA hat still sat on the passenger seat, a simple piece of red fabric that had unexpectedly become a catalyst for transformation. He reached for his phone again, this time to call Rachel Chun, a promising young retail manager he'd worked with at another property. Crystal Haven Mall needed new leadership, and he had a feeling Rachel's innovative approaches and commitment to inclusive spaces would be exactly what the mall needed. The evening cleaning crew began their rounds, their vacuums humming through the now quiet corridors of Crystal Haven Mall. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps most importantly, new perspectives. The mall's glass doors reflected the last rays of sunlight, promising another day of possibility, another chance to build the kind of community space that welcomed everyone, regardless of what they chose to wear on their heads. The morning light had barely begun to filter through Crystal Haven Mall skylight when Rachel Chun pulled into the executive parking space. Her Tesla Model 3, still covered in morning dew, reflected the promise of a new day. She adjusted her blazer, a power move in midnight blue, and gathered her thoughts before heading inside. At 35, Rachel had earned a reputation for turning around troubled retail spaces, but this assignment felt different. Ben Wallace's call had come with both an opportunity and a challenge. Transform Crystal Haven Mall into a model of inclusive excellence. The mall's early morning silence was broken only by the shuffle of maintenance crews finishing their night shifts and the first baristas arriving to prep their coffee stations. Rachel's heels clicked purposefully against the marble floors as she made her way to what would soon be her office. Sarah Green's personal effects had been packed away the previous evening, leaving behind a space that felt like a blank canvas. David Sterling was already waiting for her, his silver hair catching the morning light. "Rachel, glad you could start on such short notice. We have a full day ahead." "The sooner we begin, the better," Rachel replied, setting her laptop bag on the modernist desk. "I've reviewed the incident report from Saturday. We have some work to do." The morning's first meeting was scheduled for 7:30 a.m., a full staff gathering in the mall's central court before opening hours. The fountain had been silenced for the occasion, its waters still, as if holding its breath for what was to come. Employees gathered in concentric circles, their faces showing a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Mike Carson and Jenny Lopez stood slightly apart from the group, their security uniforms freshly pressed. The additional training they'd undergone over the past few days had left them changed, more thoughtful, more aware of the weight their positions carried. Jenny's hand rested near her radio out of habit, but her posture was more relaxed, more approachable. At precisely 7:30, Ben Wallace emerged from the administrative corridor, flanked by David Sterling and Rachel Chun. The sight of the mall's owner caused a ripple of whispers through the assembled staff. Ben had chosen to wear a simple charcoal suit today, his presence commanding attention without any additional accessories. "Good morning." Ben's voice carried naturally through the space, warm and authoritative. "Many of you know why we're here today. Last Saturday, an incident occurred that showed us we need to do better. But rather than dwell on what went wrong, we're going to focus on how we move forward." He gestured to Rachel, who stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. "This is Rachel Chun, your new mall manager. She brings with her a vision for what Crystal Haven Mall can become. Not just a shopping destination, but a true community space where everyone feels welcome." Rachel surveyed the faces before her, making eye contact with as many staff members as possible. "Change can be uncomfortable," she began, her voice clear and steady. "But discomfort often precedes growth. Starting today, we're implementing new policies and procedures that will help us serve our community better." The presentation screen behind them flickered to life, displaying the new customer service guidelines. Rachel walked the staff through each point, emphasizing the importance of treating every visitor with respect, regardless of their appearance, beliefs, or background. In the crowd, Laura Williams shifted uncomfortably. She had returned to the mall, not for shopping this time, but to face the consequences of her actions. The memory of Saturday's events still burned fresh in her mind. As Rachel spoke about the importance of challenging our own biases, Laura found herself nodding slowly, recognition dawning in her eyes. The staff training sessions would run throughout the week, but this morning's meeting was about setting the tone. Ben took the podium again, this time sharing his personal vision for the mall's future. "Crystal Haven isn't just a collection of stores," he explained, gesturing to the space around them. "It's a microcosm of our larger society. How we treat each other here reflects who we are as a community." As he spoke, the first rays of sunlight began to pierce through the skylight, creating a natural spotlight on the gathering. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. A new day was quite literally dawning for Crystal Haven Mall. The meeting concluded with a Q&A session, during which Rachel demonstrated why Ben had chosen her for this role. She handled each question with a perfect blend of authority and empathy, addressing concerns about implementation while maintaining a clear focus on the mall's new direction. As the staff dispersed to prepare for the mall's opening, Ben noticed Laura lingering near the fountain. She seemed to be gathering her courage, and after a moment's hesitation, she approached him. "Mr. Wallace," she began, her voice lacking its usual forceful confidence. "I owe you an apology. My behavior on Saturday was inexcusable." Ben studied her for a moment before responding. "Apology accepted, Ms. Williams. But I hope you'll consider turning this experience into something positive. We're forming a customer advisory board to help guide our inclusion efforts. Someone with your passion for this community could be an asset, if it's directed constructively." Laura's eyes widened at the unexpected offer. "You'd want me involved? After what happened?" "Sometimes our greatest mistakes lead to our most meaningful contributions," Ben replied, offering a gentle smile. "Think about it." The mall's opening music began to play softly through the speakers, signaling the start of another business day. Rachel was already in motion, conducting final checks with security and maintenance teams. Mike and Jenny had taken up their posts, their new training evident in their more engaging presence. David Sterling watched from the second-floor balcony as the mall came to life below. The first customers began trickling in. A young mother with a stroller, an elderly couple walking arm in arm, a group of teenagers headed for the coffee shop. Each one represented the diversity of their community. Each one now guaranteed a more welcoming experience than before. In her new office, Rachel began reviewing the applications for the customer service training team. The wall behind her desk, previously covered in sales charts, now displayed a different kind of metric: customer satisfaction scores, inclusion benchmarks, community engagement statistics. A framed mission statement held the central position: Crystal Haven Mall, where every story is welcome. Ben's Tesla pulled away from the mall, but his work was far from over. He had meetings scheduled with his other property managers, determined to implement similar changes across his entire portfolio. The red MAGA hat sat on his desk at home, not hidden away, but serving as a reminder that leadership sometimes means facing uncomfortable truths and turning them into opportunities for growth. The fountain resumed its gentle splashing, its waters catching the morning light and throwing tiny rainbows across the polished floors. Crystal Haven Mall was awakening to more than just another business day. It was awakening to a new chapter in its story, one where the measure of success would be counted not just in dollars, but in the smiles of welcome on every face that passed through its doors. The rainbows dancing across Crystal Haven Mall's marble floors seemed to multiply as the morning progressed, each beam of light reflecting the promise of transformation. Rachel Chen's first week as mall manager had brought changes that rippled through the building like waves in a pond, touching every corner of the vast retail space. The newly installed digital welcome board near the main entrance displayed rotating messages of inclusion in elegant typography. "All are welcome here. Every story matters. Come as you are." The signs had been Rachel's first initiative, but far from her last. She stood now watch ING shoppers' reactions to the messages, noting how some paused to take photos, while others nodded approvingly. In the security office, Mike Carson and Jenny Lopez were conducting their morning briefing with a noticeably different approach. The wall-mounted screens still showed the same camera feeds, but the conversation had shifted from mere incident reports to proactive community engagement. "Remember," Jenny was saying to the assembled security team, her voice carrying the wisdom gained from recent training, "our role isn't just about maintaining order. It's about creating an environment where every visitor feels safe and respected." She gestured to a new flowchart on the wall, titled Engagement Protocol, which emphasized de-escalation and understanding before action. Mike added, "We've added cultural sensitivity training to our weekly schedules. Starting today, we'll be rotating through sessions with Dr. Martinez from the community college. She's an expert in conflict resolution and cross-cultural communication." The security team, expanded now to include members from diverse backgrounds, listened attentively. Among them was James Chun, no relation to Rachel, a former social worker who had been specifically recruited for his experience in community outreach. His presence represented a shift in how Crystal Haven viewed security, not as a barrier, but as a bridge. Meanwhile, in the newly renovated community room on the second floor, Laura Williams was leading her first advisory board meeting. The irony of her position wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who had once demanded the removal of a customer was now championing inclusion. But her transformation had been genuine. sparked by Ben Wallace's unexpected offer of redemption. Our shopping center needs to reflect the full spectrum of our community, Laura was saying, her familiar intensity now channeled into constructive leadership. We've identified several areas where we can make immediate improvements. The advisory board, carefully selected to represent the community's diversity, included local religious leaders, small business owners, disability advocates, and youth representatives. They sat around a circular table, Rachel's deliberate choice to emphasize equality in discussion, reviewing proposals for upcoming community events. Down in the food court, the transformation was taking physical form. The sterile, corporate aesthetic was giving way to a warmer, more inviting atmosphere. Local artists had been commissioned to create murals celebrating the area's diverse history, and the formerly uniform seating had been replaced with a variety of options to accommodate different needs and preferences. Sarah Chun, Rachel's younger sister and a renowned restaurant consultant, was overseeing the renovation of the dining spaces. Food brings people together, she explained to the gathered vendors, but only if everyone feels welcome at the table. The new layout included quiet corners for sensory-sensitive diners, family-style seating for large groups, and accessible spaces seamlessly integrated throughout. The mall's central fountain, once merely decorative, had been reimagined as a gathering space. Custom-designed seating now encircled the water feature, creating natural conversation areas. The sound of falling water provided a gentle acoustic barrier, allowing multiple small groups to converse comfortably without disturbing each other. Ben Wallace observed these changes during his weekly visits, often arriving unannounced and sitting quietly near the fountain. He would watch families navigate the space, noting how the new design facilitated natural interactions between different community groups. Sometimes he wore his MAGA hat, other times not, but the reaction from staff and security remained consistently professional regardless of his attire. One particular Tuesday morning, he noticed a group of elderly men and women gathering near the fountain. They represented various cultural backgrounds, but shared animated conversations over coffee from the newly opened local roastery. Among them was Mr. Patterson, a retired history teacher who had been vocal in his criticism of the mall's previous atmosphere. "Mr. Wallace," Patterson called out, recognizing Ben from community meetings. "Join us? We're discussing the changes you've made here." Ben accepted the invitation, settling into one of the ergonomic chairs that had replaced the old metal benches. The group's conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from the mall's new cultural events calendar to the improved accessibility features. "You know," Patterson mused, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, "I used to avoid coming here. Felt like the place wasn't meant for people like me, old set in my ways. But now," he gestured to the diverse group around him, "now it feels like home." Rachel, passing by on her morning rounds, caught Ben's eye and smiled. She had just finished meeting with the mall's marketing team about an upcoming cultural festival that would showcase the community's various traditions through food, music, and art. The event would transform the entire mall into a celebration of diversity, with each store participating in its own unique way. The marketing materials for the festival, displayed on the mall's new digital boards, featured faces from every segment of the community. But more than just representation, they told stories, real stories of local residents, their challenges, their triumphs, their connections to the space that was becoming more than just a shopping center. In her office, Rachel reviewed the latest customer satisfaction metrics. The numbers were trending upward, but more importantly, the comments reflected a deeper change. "Finally feels seen here," read one. "Like shopping with family," said another. Each piece of feedback validated the direction they had taken. The afternoon sun shifted the rainbow patterns across the floor, creating new configurations of light and color. Near the east entrance, a young woman in a hijab was helping an elderly gentleman with his shopping bags. At the children's play area, kids of various backgrounds shared the new interactive installations while their parents chatted nearby. The sound of multiple languages mixed with laughter and conversation created a symphony of community, rising above the gentle splash of the fountain. Crystal Haven Mall had become what its name had always promised, a haven, not just for shopping, but for genuine human connection. As the day progressed, Ben found himself back in the food court, observing the dinner rush. The new halal, kosher, and vegan options sat comfortably alongside traditional mall fare, each vendor space designed to welcome all customers equally. He watched as a teenager in a punk rock t-shirt shared a table with a woman in traditional African dress, both enjoying their meals without a second thought about their differences. The mall's transformation had exceeded even his expectations. What had started as a response to a single incident had grown into a model for retail spaces nationwide. Other mall owners had begun reaching out, asking about Crystal Haven's inclusion initiatives and community engagement strategies. Other mall owners' growing interest in Crystal Haven's success had sparked something unexpected in Ben Wallace. As he sat in his office overlooking the bustling food court, he realized this transformation could be the cornerstone of his legacy. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the stack of requests from retail executives across the country, all eager to learn from Crystal Haven's example. Rachel Chen's latest report sat open on his tablet, filled with metrics that told a story of remarkable change. Foot traffic had increased by 32% over the past month, with customer satisfaction scores reaching unprecedented levels. But it was the qualitative data that truly captured the transformation. Pages of customer testimonials describing moments of connection, understanding, and community that went far beyond traditional retail experiences. The sound of laughter drew his attention back to the food court below. A diverse group of teenagers had pushed several tables together, creating an impromptu study space. Their textbooks and laptops shared space with an eclectic mix of cuisine from various vendors. Kosher pizza beside halal kebabs, vegan sushi next to traditional burgers. The scene embodied everything Crystal Haven had become. David Sterling entered Ben's office, carrying a thick folder of potential expansion plans. The California group called again, he said, settling into one of the ergonomic chairs. They're particularly interested in our security training program. The security program had indeed become one of Crystal Haven's most notable successes. Mike Carson and Jenny Lopez had evolved into something more than security officers. They were now community ambassadors. Their team's approach to conflict resolution had become a case study in retail management courses at the local university. Send them our training materials, Ben decided, standing to look out over his transformed mall. But make sure they understand, this isn't just about implementing new procedures. It's about changing the entire culture of retail spaces. Below, the evening shopping crowd moved through the mall's corridors like a choreographed dance. The new layout, designed with input from the Community Advisory Board, had created natural gathering spaces that encouraged interaction between different groups. The central fountain area had become particularly popular, its ambient sound creating intimate conversation spaces despite the open design. Laura Williams was there now, hosting a community outreach event. The former instigator of conflict had become one of Crystal Haven's most effective advocates for change. Her passionate nature, once a source of division, now fueled initiatives that brought people together. Today's event focused on local artisans, with displays showcasing crafts from various cultural traditions. "Mr. Wallace," a voice called out, drawing Ben's attention to the corridor. Tommy, his grandson, was walking toward the office, still wearing his college backpack. The young man's visits had become more frequent since the mall's transformation, proud of his grandfather's role in creating this inclusive space. "I brought some friends from school," Tommy explained, gesturing to a diverse group of students waiting near the fountain. "They wouldn't believe me when I told them about what you've done here." Ben smiled, remembering the red MAGA hat that had sparked this journey. It still sat on his desk at home, now framed alongside news articles about Crystal Haven's transformation. The hat had become a symbol not of division, but of the possibility for change and growth. As evening approached, the mall's lighting system gradually shifted to create a warm, intimate atmosphere. The digital welcome boards now displayed gentle evening messages in multiple languages, while the sound system played local musicians' work, another community initiative that had proven surprisingly popular. Rachel's evening rounds took her past the newly opened Cultural Exchange Center, where a photography exhibition showcased portraits of local residents sharing their immigration stories. The space had quickly become a popular destination for school field trips and community groups, adding an educational dimension to the traditional retail experience. In the security office, the night shift was beginning their briefing. The team now included members from various backgrounds, each bringing unique perspectives to their role. The walls displayed not just security protocols, but community engagement guidelines, emergency phrases in multiple languages, and cultural sensitivity reminders. Jenny was saying to the assembled team, our success isn't measured by the number of incidents we handle, but by the ones we prevent through understanding and communication. The mall's transformation had rippled out into the broader community. Local businesses had begun emulating Crystal Haven's inclusive practices, and the city council had invited Ben to share his insights on community building. What had started as a response to a single incident had evolved into a movement for positive change in retail spaces nationwide. A group of elderly women, representing different cultural backgrounds, sat chatting near the fountain. They had formed a friendship through Crystal Haven's community programs and now met regularly for coffee and conversation. Their laughter mingled with the fountain's gentle splash, creating a soundtrack of successful integration. Ben joined his grandson and his friends for dinner in the food court, listening as they shared their perspectives on the mall's evolution. Their generation's natural embrace of diversity and inclusion suggested that Crystal Haven's transformation wasn't just timely. It was essential for the future of retail spaces. As the evening wound down, the mall's cleaning crew began their nightly routine. Many of them had been part of Crystal Haven's story from the beginning, witnessing its transformation firsthand. Their uniforms now bore the same welcoming messages as the digital boards, making them visible participants in the mall's inclusive culture. The last customers of the day made their way toward the exits, but the mall's impact would continue long after its doors closed. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new opportunities for connection, and new chances to demonstrate how a simple retail space could become a catalyst for positive change in a diverse community. As the last echoes of footsteps faded from Crystal Haven Mall's corridors, the evening cleaning crew's gentle hum provided a soothing backdrop to the day's end. The fountain's waters reflected the dimmed evening lights, casting shimmering patterns across the polished floors. But Crystal Haven's influence continued well beyond its physical walls, spreading into the community like ripples in a pond. Behind the scenes, Rachel Chin sat in her office, reviewing the day's events with satisfaction. The evening's community gathering had drawn an unprecedented mix of residents, from elderly veterans sharing stories with immigrant families to teenagers teaching seniors how to use the mall's new interactive directory systems. The security footage played silently on one of her monitors, showing moments of genuine connection that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Mike Carson and Ginny Lopez were completing their final rounds, their roles having evolved far beyond traditional security work. They now knew many regular visitors by name, greeting them in their native languages and helping forge connections between different community groups. Tonight, they had helped organize an impromptu celebration when Mr. Rodriguez, a longtime mall maintenance worker, became a U.S. citizen. The mall's transformation had begun attracting national attention. Tomorrow morning, a crew from a major news network would arrive to document what they were calling the Crystal Haven model. Ben Wallace had initially hesitated about the publicity, but Rachel convinced him that their story could inspire similar changes across the country. In the food court, the last vendor was closing up shop. Mrs. Kim, owner of Soul Street Kitchen, chatted with Ahmed from Halal Delights as they cleaned their stations. Their businesses had flourished under the mall's new approach, and they had even collaborated on fusion dishes that represented their shared commitment to bringing people together through food. The Cultural Exchange Center's lights still glowed softly, its walls lined with photographs from the day's events. A new exhibition was being installed, led Faces of Crystal Haven, featuring portraits and stories of the people who made the mall more than just a shopping destination. The centerpiece would be a massive mosaic created by local artists, combining traditional techniques from various cultures into a stunning visual representation of community unity. Laura Williams, once the catalyst for change through conflict, now stood in front of the mosaic installation space, making final adjustments to the lighting. Her transformation had been as remarkable as the mall's, She had channeled her passionate nature into building bridges instead of walls. Tomorrow, she would lead a workshop on turning conflict into opportunity, sharing her personal journey with other community leaders. The mall's architectural features have been subtly modified to reflect its new identity. Benches were arranged in conversational clusters. Planters filled with vegetation from different continents created natural gathering spaces, and interactive art installations encouraged collaboration between strangers. Even the background music had been carefully curated to represent various cultural traditions while maintaining a harmonious atmosphere. In the security office, the night team was reviewing footage not for incidents, but for moments of connection to add to their training materials. They had documented countless instances of spontaneous kindness. A teenager helping an elderly woman with heavy bags, children from different backgrounds sharing toys in the play area, strangers coming together to help someone who had dropped their purchases. The mall's transformation had attracted attention from urban planners and sociologists who saw it as a model for modern community spaces. Crystal Haven had become more than a shopping center. It was a living laboratory for social integration and community building. Universities had begun sending students to study its impact on local demographics and social patterns. As midnight approached, Ben Wallace made one final walk through his transformed mall. The quiet corridors held echoes of the day's conversations, laughter, and shared experiences. He paused by the fountain, remembering the incident that had sparked this journey. The red MAGA hat that had caused such controversy now sat in a display case in the Cultural Exchange Center, alongside other symbols of transformation and understanding. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. The mall would continue to evolve, responding to the community's needs and aspirations. But for now, in the peaceful quiet of night, Crystal Haven stood as a testament to the possibility of positive change, a beacon of hope in a world often divided by misunderstanding.